Hello everyone, my name is Elliot Geltz, and today I'm going to be talking about a piece of media that isn't over a decade old. Because if I want the channel to actually grow and gain new viewers, I have to talk about things that are relevant at least every now and then. So, for today we're going to be talking about Netflix's newest season of their Castlevania adaptation, Castlevania Nocturne. This is a very contentious topic amongst Castlevania fans. A lot of people really love the show, a lot of people really hate it. There are valid reasons for both, but everyone seems to be really digging in their heels and fighting tooth and nail over each side. This video is going to just be my personal subjective opinions about the show. This isn't a objective statement. This isn't a me denouncing how you feel if you disagree with me. This is just how I feel about the show. If you disagree with anything or everything I'm about to say, that's perfectly okay. That's how you feel. This is how I feel. It's just a piece of fiction. There are things relevant to storytelling and media where it is more reasonable to get into a more heated discussion, but I feel like this and the things being contested about this show, we can be chill about this. I can say how I feel and you can say how you feel if you disagree with me, and we can be reasonable about that. That is all this video is. It isn't me attacking you based on your opinions. Please don't take it as such. So, Castlevania is a very character-driven story. It is very much about its characters and what they go through, which you can say about a lot of stories. But Castlevania is very much centered on its characters, if that makes sense. So, in regards to Nocturne, I feel as though what is good about it and what is bad about it can be very directly linked to individual characters. So for the sake of making this video orderly and categorized, I'm going to be talking about each of the main characters in turn, about what I feel works with them and what doesn't. And I think that's the easiest way to get through the entirety of the show and make what I'm saying at least seem coherent, if not be coherent. So, we're going to start with our protagonist, Richter Belmont. Richter... We're starting with one of the most contentious points in the show. Richter's portrayal in Nocturne, which by the way, I'm going to be talking about massive spoilers for the show. I'm not going to be holding back in any way. I'm making this video with you, the viewer, under the presumption you've already seen the show. If you have not, I do love Nocturne. I think it is a great entry into the Castlevania franchise. I think it is very much worth your time. Please give it a shot if you're in any way interested in Castlevania or gothic/action horror or anything of the sort. So, with that warning out of the way, Richter. In the games, Richter is very much a powerhouse, fully realized Belmont that has figured out his place in the world and has utmost control of his abilities. This Richter is not. In the games, he is an adult. In Nocturne, he is only 17, and he is very much characterized by trauma he experienced as a child that he is working through over the course of the show, which is a far cry from his game adaptation portrayal. A lot of people don't like that. I do. I don't think this portrayal of Richter in any way contradicts the games, the way a lot of people seem to be presenting it. I don't think this is a disservice to his character. I think this is just telling a story set in a different period of his life. I could very much see Richter from the games as a 30-something-year-old man. I forget how old he is in the games. I could very much see him as an adult starting off as the scared 10-year-old kid watching a vampire kill his mom that we see in the first episode, then growing into the more confident, realized 17-year-old we see in the last episode that has regained his magic powers and has gained some more confidence in who he is and what he is. And I could see that 17-year-old then going on to grow into the grown man we see in Symphony of the Night, Dracula X, Rondo of Blood. I believe there's a fourth game Richter is in. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, I could see this Richter clicking with the canon Richter of the games in his progression as a person. There is a scene with Richter that is very contentious where he makes a breakthrough with his trauma and regains his magic powers and fights back against a group of vampires. And when he gets down to their leader, who he's about to execute, he says a line along the lines of, I was about to say something witty and cutting and brutal, but fuck it, and then he kills the guy. A lot of people really don't like that. A lot of people think that's very childish writing, that's not very witty, not very up to par for something you would expect with Netflix's budget and expectations. Again, I disagree. I think that scene fits for the Richter we're seeing. At that point in time, Richter is only 17 years old. He is still a child. He is barely coming out of his adolescence and hasn't even reached adulthood yet. Like that line, that's something a 17-year-old would think is cool. That is something someone Richter's age would think is cool and then say in that situation. I think it fits for him in the age that we are seeing him. I wouldn't see the game Richter saying that when he's an adult. I would see him being much more reserved, like you see in his confrontation with Dracula at the start of Symphony of the Night, where he's more poetic and mature. But this Richter who's just a teenager and is riding high on the power of relearning how to shoot fireballs, that Richter would say something like that. I think it fits for him. I think it's a perfectly fine scene. Overall, Richter in Nocturne gets an A+. I think he is a great character. I think his fitting in the narrative, where he fits in the narrative, I think he works well. I think they've done their best with Richter. There are things I would have done differently if I were in charge of writing Richter, but that's just personal taste. That's not things that I think the writers should have done differently. Moving on to Maria and Tara, I'm putting them together, both because they're mother and daughter, and also because there's just not enough to say about either to make them their own place in the video. So anyway, I really like Maria. Again, that is a contentious thing to say with some people. A lot of people don't like her portrayal here. And it comes down to two things I've seen in discourse in Castlevania fan circles. A lot of people are saying, one, Maria's powers are boring, and two, her characterization is very flat and shallow. I disagree on both fronts. I love Maria's power set, and I love the way it's used in this series. At first, I was put off by it. Maria's power is to conjure supernatural animals from another dimension. And she conjures them. It's a bird, a cat, and I think a turtle. A bird, a cat, and a turtle. In the games, this was meant to be the Chinese four cardinal directions. If you're not familiar with Chinese mythology, in Chinese mythology, the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, all have an animal associated with them. A bird, a tiger, a turtle, and I believe the fourth one is a dragon. Here in Nocturne, we only see the first three, and she conjures them to fight monsters for them. When she first appeared, it was very flat. She would just conjure the bird and the cat, and she would sick them on vampires like an attack dog. And it's like, okay, that's what it is. It clicks very well when paired with Richter, because you would get action scenes with Richter doing his whip thing, his acrobatics, his throwing knives, and that would be intercut with the spectacle of the ghost animals attacking shit. And that made it a nice change of beat for the action scenes, but that was all there was to it. We then get to the fight in the chateau, where she brings in the turtle, her third animal, and the action scenes will go with Maria conjuring the bird and the cat to attack some dudes over here, and then a guy over here will come into melee with her and swing at her, and she would conjure the turtle as a shield to pop in and block the attack, and then conjure the cat back to hand, kind of, to attack that guy, and use the turtle to block something over here. And that took my breath away. That was great. It makes Maria more active and involved in the fight. It's not just more dynamic and more of a spectacle to see happen. It's also showing that Maria is engaged and actively thinking tactically about where her opponents are and what she needs to be doing to keep herself safe. I love that evolution. And then the show blew it out of the water with the final fight in the chapel where she and Richter throw down with Drolta, who we'll get to, she's on the bad guy side, where Maria is not just conjuring everything she's got. She's throwing multiple birds, she's throwing the cat in there, she's pushing everything she has in this fight. She also uses the environment to her advantage, stepping over the pews to gain distance as Drolta is charging her, and then using her foot. Up until this point, we've only seen her draw the circle that summons one of the animals with her hand. At this point, while stepping over the pews, she uses her foot to... You can't see it. I'm using my foot to draw a circle. She uses her foot to draw a circle that conjures the turtle in this uppercut that just blasts Drolta in the face. And then while she's stunned, the turtle serves as a launch point for the cat to launch off of into Drolta, knocking her to the ground. It's so hype. I love it. This is so cool. This is a point I'm going to get into with more of the cast. Maria is the best example of it being done well. This is a character that has a power set and is flexing how to use it creatively and showing that she is actively thinking of how to make use of it. This isn't just, I have animals, I make animals and throw them at enemy. This is, she is using them to combo off of each other and also employing the environment to deploy them in ways that bolster their abilities to do more damage to the enemy. That's fantastic. I love seeing that. When you have a show that has characters that use supernatural powers to fight enemies of any kind, it doesn't really matter what, having this element bolsters your show to the next level. This is what it does. This is great. It's not just a great spectacle to see happen. Like I've said a dozen times now, it shows the internal creativity of the character. It feels like something the character came up with on their own in their universe to make the best use of their abilities. And it really adds an extra dimension to a character like Maria. Terra falls a little short in this regard. In terms of her place in the narrative as a mother figure to Maria and Richter, she does very well. I think she's a very empathic, caring person, and that comes across organically, both in her voice acting and her writing, which is very important. But in terms of combat, I feel like her elemental powers just are lacking. The most creative thing she does is conjure ice as a little shield to block attacks. And coming off of Sypha in the original series, who did so much creative shit, like doing the same thing with ice, but making little stepping stones mid-air to let her traverse an area off the ground to functionally fly, and then using fire to literally fly. Like, creative stuff like that being followed up with the very basic use of the power with Terra feels a little flat. And then it feels even more flat when Richter gets his power back and he's doing shit like covering his hands in ice and fire to box enemies, or shooting fire out of his foot to propel himself into an enemy to cover distance. Seeing all that creativity both in the previous series and in this one, and then Terra just doesn't do much at all, it feels a little flat. It's kind of justified by the fact that she's not much of a fighter. She's much more of a caretaker and a scholarly magician, as opposed to a combative magician. But it would still have been nice to see, I don't know, something. I take it back. The most creative thing we do is when Emmanuel is about to sacrifice Maria. Terra takes the icicle in her hand that she was using to fight a monster and turns it into water vapor, I think, and the pressure caused by the rapid change knocks him back. That was kind of cool to see. It would have been nice to see a few more things like that. Insofar as their characterizations, I think Tara's perfectly good for what she is. She's a secondary character, so I don't expect her to have the biggest, most involved characterization and impact on the story. So her position as Maria and Richter, and to a certain extent Annette, her position as their mother figure, it works fine because it's so well executed. It's perfectly good for what it is. A lot of people don't like Maria being a member of the French Revolution, and they feel like her characterization is much more flat. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think Maria is perfectly solid as she is. I very much like the line in the final episode when Maria's pulled off the altar by Tara, having come within a few inches of being sacrificed to Erzsébet by Emmanuel. That, by the way, Emmanuel's the abbot. I forgot his name when I made the whiteboard. Anyway, and she very angrily declares that the revolution will destroy the church to Emmanuel's face. I love that line, and it's the bow that pulls all of Maria together. It shows she was already very emotionally invested in the revolution. You could see that in everything she does. From how involved she is in evangelizing people to the revolution, to the fervor she speaks about it with. But this really delivers it home how much it means to her. The revolution is everything to her. And her saying that isn't just what the what the revolution would end up doing. It's also this very pointed attack against Manuel. It's meant to hurt him. It's meant to bite deep. It's very venomous. And using the plot thread of the revolution and the church with their interpersonal relationship coming together in this very poignant moment where she is very deliberately saying something to hurt him as deeply as possible. That is very personal, it's very emotional, and it shows that all of this isn't just window dressing to dress up Maria and make her into a prop for the plot. She really is I understand she's a fictional character. I don't mean she's a literally real person when I say this. It makes her feel like a real person when she speaks about these things. It feels like it comes from an organic, emotional place. So Maria and Tara, A+. I love them to tears. I think they're a great addition to the show. Annette and Edouard. I'm going to start with Edouard because he's a lot simpler and I'm going to get more to the point. Annette's a little more... I have a couple grievances, but when you hear me say that, they're not going to be what you think. But we're going to get to that. So Edouard. I think Edouard's great for what he is. He's a tertiary character. He is a friend of Annette. He gets killed and made into a night creature, and he gives us a POV into the night creature side of the bad guys. And he has this lovely, touching subplot about reaching out to the other night creatures and getting them to regain their humanity. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't step on the toes of any of the other characters or any of the other plots. It doesn't take up too much time on screen. I think it is perfectly solid for this minor aspect of the show that just adds a little something to fill in the gaps when the other plots aren't happening. As far as his writing, his voice acting, his characterization, I think they're all really solid. I like his gimmick of his eyes letting him have this minor magical ability to see souls. I like that because we don't get an answer as to what that is. It adds this little bit of mystery to the magic of the setting, and it adds this other little corner where we don't know what's going on. And there's always going to be that little corner where we don't know what's going on, because I don't think they're ever going to go into that or explain more about it. Relating that to Annette, we know full well where Annette's powers come from, and her heritage giving her these powers are a very big part of her character. These two together are fantastic. I love how they contrast each other, and I love how Annette's powers give us lots of view into the setting and answers as to what's going on and how things work. While at the same time, Edouard's abilities give us this little corner of mystery to reel it back in and keep us guessing as to everything that's going on. I love that. I love that they're paired like that, they work together like that. I think that's great. I think that's great writing. Now, moving on to Annette specifically, I love how her story is all about her heritage, and I love how it ties back into African mythology and culture. I don't think African mythology gets as much play in modern media as it should. Typically, when a mythology comes into play, it is going to be the Greeks or the Norse, maybe the Chinese or Japanese mythologies if you're feeling a little spicy. Africa gets almost no play, so I'm glad it's getting this place at the forefront of the story where people can see a little bit of it. I don't know much about African mythology or culture, so I can't attest as to whether or not its portrayal in the show is accurate to real-life African mythology, or mythology from where Annette is from in Africa, because Africa is, of course, a whole continent. You can't really say, I know I've said African mythology multiple times now, but it's really more accurate to say the mythologies of different regions, because different places held different beliefs in Africa. It's an entire continent full of different peoples that all believe different things. But anyway, coming back to the show, I can't attest as to whether or not its portrayal is accurate to any real-world belief. What I can attest to is that it is very interesting. And this prompted me to look up things the show is portraying to see if they were reflective of real life. And as an extension of that, I learned a little bit more about different African cultures and mythologies. And that is really good on an objective level. When a piece of media prompts you to learn more about a topic, especially a different people that you otherwise might not have, that is good. I am not just good writing. I'm saying that is a good thing to invoke in people. So on that front, Annette, A+. I absolutely adore Annette's writing, her character, her story, all of that. Where Annette falters for me is with her powers. Like I said with Maria and Tara and Richter, and going back to Sypha in the previous series, having a character with elemental powers, or powers of any kind, and having them find creative ways to utilize them is what bolsters a show like this very greatly from something that's good to great. Unfortunately, I feel like Annette falters on that front. She has power over the earth and metal, and she never really uses them very creatively over the course of the show. 95% of the time, Annette uses her powers to make swords out of thin air, and then she will throw one and use it as a projectile, and that's it. When I first saw that, my natural conclusion was, oh, like Maria got the elevation of using the turtle, whipping that out as a shield, we're going to get Annette throwing her sword and then using her power to boomerang it and control it like the destructo disc from Dragon Ball. That was my natural conclusion, because that is such a common trope that I just assumed it was going to happen, and then it never did. And we didn't get anything more creative than that, and we got nothing. And I feel like that's a little harsh to say, but it's honestly the truth. Annette doesn't really use her powers in any way that's creative. The most we get is her pulling apart a fence and using its iron posts to make crosses to fight the vampire that was her former owner as a slave. And I'm going to get to that scene in a moment, because it deserves its own topic. But that's the best it gets, and that's honestly okay at best. And when okay at best is the best we get, it's left lackluster. There is so much more Annette could have done. When you look at a show like Avatar, with Toph and Earthbending, or even Earthbending as a whole, minor nameless characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra used Earthbending very creatively for like one-off bad guys the good guys fought. And a main character in the series that's in almost every episode doesn't get any good creative use of their powers moment. That hampers the show a great deal. Not enough that I would say it ruins anything. It's just sorely disappointing that we didn't get anything better than what we saw. Especially given the environments Annette fights in. she is almost always in an open field, in an underground tunnel, in a building built out of cobblestone. She has resources to use all around her. And the most interesting things we get are her making the crosses out of the fence and using a big boulder to smash through a wall. That's sort of disappointing. I really wish we could have gotten more out of Annette's powers the way we got out of Richter's elemental magic or Maria's animals. Now, between her and Juiced, I want to interject with a topic that is very contentious in the fandom right now. During the scene with Annette killing her former owner, she makes crosses out of this iron fence, and it's shown that the crosses have actual tangible power over the vampire. Annette even says that it's the Christian God's power that has power over the vampire and is what's hurting him. I really like that scene. I'm going to interject my interjection with this. I really like that scene because it hard confirms the Christian God is real in this setting, on top of Annette's powers confirming that the African mythologies are real because she is getting her powers from an African god. So having this fantasy kitchen sink where all these mythologies are real at once, I dig that. I really like that. I think it's great. Moving back to the scene, a lot of people are upset with Season 1 because in Season 1 there's a scene where Sypha asks Trevor, why would a vampire from a country like India that at the time didn't have any concept of Christianity in it, why would a vampire from a place like that have any fear for a Christian cross when they wouldn't know what that is or what religion that's from? Trevor gives a very scientific explanation that the biology of a vampire over the course of their turning changes, and their eyeballs and the way their vision change, such that if you shove a geometric figure in their face, like a cross, like this, it distorts their vision and confuses them, opening them up to attack. It is very clear with the scene with Annette and her former owner that the Christian God has literal, magical, supernatural power over the vampire. It's not just what Trevor said. Touching the crosses burns him. And in the first season, we see a Christian priest bless water that causes supernatural harm to vampires and night creatures, assumedly being sourced from the power of the Christian God. And a lot of people contest these things as saying, oh, the writing is all over the place because it's contradictory. I swear to God, I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm not trying to be hurtful. I'm not trying to be insulting when I say this. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm not being facetious or joking or trying to laugh at anybody or any way. I'm being sincere. The people that say that, I need you to rewatch the show because it feels like you didn't actually watch it. Because, let's take these two disparate threads. Trevor's explanation of it's the vampire's biology and shoving a geometric figure in their face distorts their vision. And then the other thread of the Christian God is real and has real power over vampires in this setting. First and foremost, these two things aren't contradictory. No part of them overlaps or contradicts one another. They could just be true at the same time. There is nothing contradictory about them. That is demonstrably the case. I just laid out the basic building blocks of both threads, clear as day. Nothing about either of them overlaps. Also, Trevor could just be wrong. I see people take that scene as Trevor speaking the 100% canon gospel truth about the nature of the series. Trevor could just be wrong. He could just be wrong. At that point in his life, Trevor had seen his whole family torn apart by the church and torn apart by angry peasants spurned by the church or spurred on by the church to attack the Belmont family. He has spent all his life running from the church, and in that narrative, he has at multiple times come to blows and had to kill members of the church for being antagonistic to him. It is understandable that when someone asks him, why does the cross have power over vampires, his first explanation wouldn't be particularly rooted in Christian mythology. it makes perfect sense for him to give that answer regardless of if it's true or not. And if it's true, it doesn't change anything. It doesn't contradict the scene in the first season of the first show where a priest blesses water that then hurts vampires. And it doesn't contradict Annette's scene where crosses help her kill her former owner. These things can be true at the same time, and it's entirely possible that if they're not, Trevor's just wrong. I harp on this because I see people all over the place saying this is shitty writing that's all over the place and incongruent and doesn't agree with itself, and Netflix is awful for having written this, and this is a personal attack on me and my family. How dare they do this? It's not. It's really not. And like I said, at the start of this little tangent, I say little, I've been going at this for several minutes now. I'm not saying this to be aggressive or insulting or diminishing to anyone in any way, but these points, it's wrong. I'm just going to flat out say it. If that's your hang up with the show, you took away false information from the show, from your watch of it, because these points are not contradictory in the slightest. If you're not particularly involved in Castlevania fan circles at the time of this video's upload, that rant probably seems unhinged and out of nowhere for you. People are fighting tooth and nail over this all over the place, to the point I would be remiss in discussing the show if I didn't bring it up when I hit Annette and that scene with the vampire she kills. That's everything I feel on the topic. We're going to move on now. Now we come to Juiced. Another contentious point for some people, that people can yell at me that I'm an awful person for this over. In the show, Juiced has hit rock bottom. He is from, I believe, Harmony of Dissonance. It might be Circle of the Moon. I forget which game. But in his game, where you can play as him, there is a bad ending where everyone he loves is dead and it's awful and he is sad about it. In Nocturne, that is the ending Juiced got to his life. His wife and his best friend were killed by vampires in front of him. That loss cut off his connection to his magic, the way Julia's death cut off Richter's, and he has been living as a sad, bitter old man for a very long time when he is introduced in the series. A lot of people really hate that. A lot of fans of Juiced wish that his portrayal in the Netflix series would have been him at his best, when he was a cool guy doing his best and kicking ass all over the place. And to the fans of Juiced that feel like they got shafted, I'm going to be 100% sincere with you. I feel that. Like, I love Trevor and Richter, so I'm eating good right now. But if you're a fan of Juiced and he's your favorite Belmont, it's understandable you would feel frustrated with this. Those feelings are perfectly valid, and I feel ya. But I can't deny that Juiced's place, that's a weird word to say, Juiced's place in the narrative is good. I can't deny that. He serves as a bitter example of what Richter could be, and it also gives Richter a little glimmer of hope, one last member of his family. Maria and Tara are family, but finding Juiced and having another Belmont, another person who felt how heavy the whip is, another person who felt all the pressure of the responsibility of being a Belmont, he finally finds one, and then Richter feels the threat of losing all of it after finding another Belmont, that inspiring him to reconnect with his magic in that big dramatic scene I talked about when I was discussing Richter. That's fantastic. That's fantastic writing, and I can't deny that. And I feel like you're still valid in feeling like you got shafted not seeing Juiced at his best. And all I can say is he is still here. We last see him in that scene, and I do sincerely hope we will see him come in with season 2 of Nocturne, which will come out whenever. At the time of this upload, it still hasn't. Season 1 just wrapped recently, so it's not like I expect it to have or anything. But anyway, I hope Juiced comes back in season 2 to get more cool moments, so fans of Juiced can have him doing cool stuff and feel satisfied. I sincerely wish that for you guys. But I can't deny his place in the narrative as it is right now is perfectly good writing, and he gets my thumbs up for it. Jumping over to the bad guy side, we have Olrox, and I'm going to lump Mizrak in with him. Mizrak isn't the most important character, but I might as well bring him up with Olrox. Olrox is utterly fantastic. I love when a character's writing is so good, it brings me around on a trope I hate. I can't really stand the trope of revenge ladders, which I've never seen coined anywhere. I'm coining it now. This is my term. You can trace it back to me. What I mean by revenge ladder is you have your protagonist, and the series starts off with a bad guy killing someone they love. So the bad guy kills them. But, they had somebody they loved who now wants revenge on the protagonist. So they do, and that's sort of a different person's story who goes on to avenge the first protagonist, and it just ladders on itself. I can't stand that. It's been done to death. No one can do anything new or fresh with it. It is boring. It is done. Please, writers all over the world, let go of it and write something else. But Olrox makes this interesting. We have what looks like a revenge ladder going on at the start of the series. Olrox even says as much when he kills Julia. Julia had killed a vampire that was very important to Olrox, his boyfriend that he was in love with. And as revenge, Olrox killed Julia, and Richter wants revenge against Olrox real bad because he killed his mom. That is so well done here, partially because it's not the center of the narrative. It is off to the side. It is something Richter and Olrox are very meagerly working on in addition to everything else going on. So it not being in the spotlight helps, and it also helps that Olrox is so flushed out as a character. He has his opinions on the world around him. He has his contentions with Erzsébet, the main antagonist of Nocturne. He has his relationship with Mizrak, a new remain partner that he is involved with. And their relationship is very complicated. It's not just love at first sight and everything is a classic romance right out the gate. It starts off with a scene with very intense but subtle subtext to the chemistry between them. And then they engage in a casual physical relationship, with Olrox even flat out saying, "I'm not in love with you, Mizrak." And then Olrox saving Mizrak's life, and then tearfully saying, "I don't want you to die," showing a little more depth and complication to his feelings for him. And Mizrak rebuffing him for not letting him die to save the other good guys. Because I know Mizrak's on the bad guy side at this point, they're on the good guy side. Anyway. And their whole relationship is more complicated than that, and it evolves over the course of their scenes, and it's engaging, and it's much better written than a tertiary character's romance with a secondary villain would be expected to be. And that carries the trope of the revenge ladder out of the pits of the trash where I put it into something I don't mind seeing. So for accomplishing that, Olrox is great. I also love his visual design. I love the diversity of his power set. I love how Olrox shows that Olrox continues a trend of vampires from all over the world having different powers. Whether this is because they're from a different people in the world that they get these powers, or it's just a different way for vampires to manifest their powers, isn't made very clear in the narrative. But we see all throughout the story and the previous season, different vampires have different powers. And I really love how Olrox keeps that going. This is a very important thread as to what makes Castlevania as a whole interesting. Because when a new supernatural creature shows up, it could be a vampire, a werewolf, a Frankenstein man, a mummy, a merman, all the classic horror staples. But they could be anything. They keep going and evolving and doing more creative things. And that makes it so that when a new thing shows up, even if it's a stock trope horror character, it could be anything, and that's exciting and engaging, and it keeps the narrative fresh no matter how long it goes on. So Olrock's fantastic. I love that to tears. If you out there disapprove or don't like the writing behind Olrock's and Mizrak, specifically their relationship, because you think it's rushed and not as well fleshed out as other romances in the series, I politely disagree. I think it's fantastic just the way it is. If you don't like their relationship because they're gay, get bent. And that's all there is to that. Moving on to Drolta, I think Drolta is great. I think she is fantastic. But I'm going to lump her in with Erzsebet a little bit here. I'm going to jump the gun and get to Erzsebet a little bit. Erzsebet's everything wrong with the series. Erzsebet is everything wrong with Nocturne. And we're going to get more into that when I get to her. But for right now, she's a little linked with Drolta on this one point. Drolta is a great antagonist. She commands attention. She's very flamboyant and dramatic and a spectacle to see on screen. Even when she's just talking to people and intimidating them, she carries this very menacing, chilling authority to her that is very interesting to watch happen, as you would want with the main antagonist of your story. Something I really like about Drolta, in addition to that, is her final design in the final episode when she comes out in like her full form. I love how it's not clear what she is. She says she's a vampire throughout the series, but her design here is more evocative of a succubus, with the bat wings and the horns and the fire hair and the little triangle tail. And we've seen succubi in the franchise before. They're an enemy in the games. So succubi are present in the mythos of Castlevania. And it's never said... Drolta's involved with the vampires. She has fangs. I don't think anyone ever flat out says she is a vampire. And I don't think we ever see her directly drinking blood. And on top of all that, for a vampire, she is very comfortable walking around in daylight with minimal cover of like an umbrella and a little veil and shit and a hat. For walking around in daylight, that would supposedly kill her if she touched it. So I love how there's this little mix-up mystery with Drolta as to what she is. Is she a vampire? Is she a succubus? It's a little up in the air. It doesn't really matter as far as her place in the narrative, but I like how there's this little spice of mystery drizzled on Drolta that helps keep her from being just another vampire, on top of her great writing and voice acting and everything. Drolta feels like she was meant to be a puppet master over Erzsebet. Drolta's the one that meets with people. Drolta's the one that sets things up. Drolta's the one that brings people into the fold and gives them orders and organizes them, while Erzsebet is just a MacGuffin in the background that supposedly has great powers that they need. And it feels like they were setting up for Drolta to be some kind of manipulative mastermind, a weaker creature manipulating and controlling Erzsebet by pulling her strings and saying what Erzsebet wants to hear to get her to do what Drolta wants, even though Drolta's weaker. That's what it feels like they were setting up for. That was never paid off on in any way in the first season of Nocturne. I don't know if I'm just making that up. I don't know if that's what the writers were going for and then they pivoted to what we got. I don't know. I wasn't behind the scenes. I wasn't a part of the show's creation. But that's what it feels like, and it's a little disappointing we didn't get that acted on. We're going to get to Erzsebet in a second, but first coming to Emmanuel the Abbot. He's fine. He's not particularly engaging or anything. I think people, like with the thing with the Christian God power over crosses and over vampires and whatnot, a lot of people just don't get the Abbot, which I find really confusing because he says why he does what he does multiple times throughout the series. And I see people in fan circles going, the Abbot makes no sense. Why is he working with vampires when he loves God so much? Why is he summoning night creatures? Why is he doing this? And if I were a better editor, I would throw up timestamps across all the episodes where he flat out says why he's doing what he's doing. I'm not I'm doing my best to be sincere, and I'm doing my best to not be condescending. I really am. I've said it like 3 or 4 times now. I'm not trying to talk down to anyone in fan circles that I am referencing when I say these things. But it's really shocking to me when when Emmanuel says to the camera, I am working with vampires because the revolutionaries are going to overthrow the government and the church. And to save the church, I'm going to use the vampires to crush the revolutionaries. He says that to the camera, right to the viewer's face. And then people go on Reddit and go, I don't get why why is he working with vampires? Do you see where the frustration comes from? That's where this is coming from. It's very clear why he's doing what he's doing. He's a very simple character that says his motivations right to the viewer and then executes on them. In terms of his position in the narrative and his writing and whatnot, he's fine. And in contrast to other things where I've gone, it's fine and I wish it was better, Emmanuel being fine, it's okay. If anything's going to be lackluster or not blow me out of the water about the series, a tertiary antagonist whose best scenes are his most important scenes. Like, the thing about Emmanuel's place in the show is the only scenes where he's really good are the scenes where he needed to be really good. And the rest of the time, he's just kind of lackluster. And I am perfectly okay with that. That results in a narrative that has payoff at its most dramatic moments, and that's what's most important. Emmanuel being kind of cardboard and not particularly interesting the rest of the time, that doesn't matter. In the final scene, when Tara and Maria's lives are on the line, and he's asked, does he love Tara? And he very tearfully says, yes, with all my heart, I love her. That's more important than any other random conversation where the delivery of his lines was a little lackluster. So as far as the Abbott Emmanuel is concerned, he's perfectly good as he is. He could have been better. It's not the most important thing in the world. Erzbet. Like I said, everything wrong with Nocturne comes down to Erzbet. Everything, at the start of this, when I said everything good and everything bad can be traced to different characters, I meant it. Everything good about the series can be traced back to different aspects and scenes and deliverances of the different characters. Everything wrong with the series, other than a few hiccups I would have rather smoothed over, but it's okay if they didn't. Everything genuinely wrong with the series comes down to Erzbet. Season 1, Episode 1 of the original series starts with Dracula appearing in the night sky as a massive, fiery face from hell, condemning an entire city to death and damnation, and then reappearing a year later, doing the same, going, I gave y'all a warning, you should have got out, and then raining bloody fetuses that turn into demons that eat them all. As his opening, that was what we first got out of Drac in the original series. That's a hell of an opening. And when Nocturne first came out, when it was first announced, I came at it with the reservation of we're probably not going to get a villain like Drac or on Drac's level. Which, like, how do you top that? How do you top Dracula? The original series, in its 3rd and 4th seasons, did it by compounding on him and building off of him and what it had already built under Drac. To start a new series with an all-new primary antagonist, I knew they weren't going to be able to do anything to top him, because how could you? Erzbet, even with that reservation in mind, is really lackluster. All she really does is stand around and hold out her magic ball of eclipse energy, I guess, and that intimidates all the other vampires. And I'm guessing they recognize that as the power to create the eclipse, and that's why they respect it so much. We, the viewer, don't. There's no grounding for that in the narrative. There's nothing showing that that's as big of a deal as it is prior to its use to create the eclipse. So she just feels very empty. She feels very full of hot air. She doesn't feel like she deserves the spot as this fear-mongering top dog vampire. And that's just really disappointing. Like I said, it feels like Drolta is manipulating her as the real antagonist, and that doesn't get capitalized on in any way. That's how hollow Erzsbet feels. I will say that in the final moments of the last episode where she undergoes her transformation in the eclipse, and she takes on that new form, and she has all these new powers, that's fantastic. I love the new design of her transformation with the lion face and the mane and the new dress. It looks so much better than the onion head haircut she had prior. She actually looks intimidating and fearful and like scary, as a top dog vampire should be. So that's fantastic. A lot of people don't like how she just no-sells anything that's thrown at her. Like, Richter will attack her in the chapel and some force field just stops his attacks. I think it's okay. I think it does its job of selling, oh, she's untouchable to the good guys as they are now with their strength. It could have been better. I don't know how I would rewrite it to make it better. Maybe just have her, instead of a force field protecting her, have her just eat the hits head on and they do nothing to her. But honestly, it's fine as it is. It's just undercut by how much of a nothing character she is otherwise. She is a lot of blustering and hot air with not a whole lot to back it up, as far as we see in the series. She's a big disappointment. She's easily the weakest part of Nocturne, but I don't think she ruins it. I think as a whole, Nocturne is still very good. I think it is still worth your time. If you like Castlevania, if you like gothic horror or action horror or anything in that realm. Overall, I really like Nocturne, and I hope more people give it a chance. I know a lot of people are really disappointed with it, especially with its main antagonist. I still feel like it's worthwhile, and I'm still hopeful that when Season 2 rolls around, we will get something better. I'm hopeful the writers and the showrunners will learn from where they stumbled with Season 1. I'm hopeful they will use Annette better in terms of her powers. I'm hopeful they will pull Erzsbet through. If she ends up lackluster in Season 1, and then they pull her out in Season 2 into something more substantial, more defined, with better writing behind her, I'd be fine with that. I would wish she was good from the start, obviously. But a lot of people treat it like we should just throw Nocturne in the trash. Like, it's not even worthwhile anymore. I think there's still something worthwhile here to look forward to in Season 2 whenever it rolls around. Like I said at the start and all throughout this video, these are just my opinions on Nocturne. If you feel differently, that is perfectly fine. I don't make this or say these things to invalidate you or contradict how you feel. This is just how I feel about Nocturne. It's a lot of positivity, and I think we need that in the Castlevania fandom right now. And I have a few grievances, but instead of whining about it and crying and wanting to throw Nocturne in the trash, I think these grievances are a moment to learn and grow moving forward into Season 2. That's how I feel about it. If you feel differently about it, that's fine too. My name is Elliot Geltz, and thank you for listening to what is almost an hour of me rambling about Castlevania. I love Castlevania. I hope you love it just as much as I do. Thank you, and goodbye.